You've landed at the edge of what medicine has known and what it's becoming. I'm Dr. Richard Rocker, and this is the Integrative Continuum, a podcast bridging biology, energy, and human potential. In each episode, we explore how quantum biology, frequency medicine, and ancient healing systems are transforming our understanding of health. This is where mitochondria meet meaning and blood work meets bioenergetics. Subscribe now and join me on the frontier of integrative healing, where science and soul are no longer separate. Welcome everyone to the Integrative Continuum Podcast, where we explore the future of healthcare, the science of human optimization, and the art of truly person-centered medicine. I'm Dr. Richard Rocker, and today's episode is one I've been looking forward to, and I'm delighted to welcome Brendan O'Brien to the podcast. Brendan is a natural fertility consultant, author, and educator who has dedicated his work to helping couples conceive by addressing the deeper reasons why the body may be struggling to support pregnancy. He is the author of Getting Pregnant When the Body Says No, a book that challenges the idea that fertility issues are purely hormonal or mechanical, and instead explores fertility through nutrition, lifestyle, stress physiology, and whole body health. He's also currently working on a second book focused on male fertility and sexual health, an area that is still far too overlooked. Brendan is the creator of the online program Foundations of Fertility, which helps women prepare their bodies for pregnancy in a structured and manageable way. And he works directly with both men and women who want to take control of their fertility journey. He also co-hosts the weekly radio show Kitchen Table Therapy on Limerick City Community Radio, lectures at the International Institute of Nutrition and Health, and serves as the director of the Nutritional Therapists of Ireland. Brendan, it's great to have you. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, Rich, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be invited, and fair play to you on your actual podcast. That takes an effort to get it up and running, but I've watched some of your episodes and they're very good and well done.
Well, thank you very much. It's a work in progress, just like today is a work in progress. To the listeners, I was just telling Brendan I had a little accident yesterday where my setup fell off the table and the computer broke, so we're using the backup. So if the quality is a little bit different, I apologize, but the main thing is you can all hear us properly, and we'll go from here. So, all right.
Aren't we living in a world where the word backup is used a lot? I mean, that's just the world we're in.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that's going to work our way into our conversation today as well. So Brendan, for those who may not know your work, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you came into the fertility space?
Yeah, I actually hate that question because I don't have a good answer. At least I think I don't have a good answer because it's literally my fourth career. And the previous careers, I actually enjoyed them all. There was like sales, there was data engineering, and I enjoyed them all, but it's just something, I call it gravity. It sort of just kept pulling me this way. An interest grew, and then I was reading books, and then literally one day my wife said to me, "Oh, there's an ad for a nutrition training program." And I just thought, I'd like to do that. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no plan. I had nothing. But it was gravity, so I ended up in it. And how I specifically ended up with fertility, that's not even a normal. There isn't even like a, I don't know what the word is, like a sexy answer. There isn't one. But quite seriously, like I didn't come at it from my own fertility problems. And just like getting into nutrition, I didn't get into nutrition because I had health problems. In fact, I didn't realize I had health problems until I got into nutrition. That's true. I ended up I had issues. I had no names for them. I turned out to be kind of IBS in hindsight, but I kind of had fixed a lot of it by that time. But the fertility aspect of it, I guess the truth of it is, I genuinely am concerned about children's health and the kind of loss of health that children are having, and that's probably programmed into me from as you know, because we've met a few times at these conferences, the Weston A. Price Foundation conferences over the years. The Weston A. Price Foundation had a big influence on me, even in picking nutrition. And they've got a very strong sort of ethos on preparing for pregnancy, having healthy children, and healthy food. It's a whole big story. Maybe we could talk about it later on. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
but I when I started my nutrition practice, I was working with all kinds of different people. It was a part-time practice for many years because I actually chose to do the full-time parenting to stay at home. So I actually took redundancy from my previous engineering job as I was studying nutrition, and I just snowballed it into, I finished out my program, went on and did a master's, all that while I was raising young kids. So it was kind of a really exciting time. Hard, but exciting. But I'm very interested in parenting. For some reason, I don't know what it is. I I feel for kids that are unhealthy, for one, even if I don't know them. I feel for kids that are kind of raised in broken families. I just, from interacting with them over the years. And I was working with clients in my own practice, all kinds of different issues, skin issues, digestive issues. You start kind of with basic stuff as a nutritionist. And it just kind of hit me over time that, like, really what I really needed to do was get to these people before they were even conceived. And so I kind of turned my attention to healthy pregnancies, and that sort of led to a few clients coming to me with fertility problems. And ultimately, a handful of them just kind of got solved. Some of them pretty easily by a fairly handy change of diet. Some of them after a lot of work. And I just said to myself one day, wow, this is powerful stuff. This whole nutrition game is powerful stuff. And I kind of just lent in that way. And so I didn't make a commitment to fertility until, I don't know, God, well, at this stage it's 10 years ago. I suppose I'm nearly 20 years in the game. Um, and I said, okay, I'm going to do fertility full time. And I just made a commitment to it, and I kind of stuck with it. And you know that phrase about the burn your boats thing, like burn your boats so there's no retreat. I just kind of made it sort of a business decision. Look, I'm doing this. End of story. So I don't see any other clients. There's been some times over the years where I thought, geez, should I have burnt my boats? you
Yeah.
know. But that's the way it ended up. So I almost felt guilty in some cases because we have three kids. They're all teenagers now. No problems whatsoever. And so, like, when clients do talk to me, I'm kind of like, initially I kind of felt a bit almost guilty. It was like it happened so easily for me. I felt like, God, I really want to help you, but because they're all expecting, a lot of people I know in the fertility space had fertility problems. But it seemed to be an anomaly. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a very interesting story. And I think there is so many people that I've seen that have that have changed their professions like you did, that were engineers, and they have gotten into the health space. There must be something about that engineer mind and looking at the health and going, wait a second, this doesn't quite add up here. It doesn't
Yeah.
quite make sense. And did that ever come to you?
I don't think I'm a classic engineer, to be fair. Um,
Right.
I, I'm I have a bit of an engineering mind. I mean, I like I like the computers. I like things like physics and how stuff works. I like that kind of stuff, but I don't think I'd be the guy that would create a new engine. I wouldn't know how to, I just wouldn't. My son, maybe, who's doing engineering, might actually do that, but I wouldn't. So I'm not a classic engineer, but I had a funny conversation years ago with Richard Burton of IINH, and I was saying the same thing that you just said there. I said, it's funny how there's a lot of engineers. There was two particular guys from the specific carbohydrate diet. I can't remember their names now, but they ran the SCD.com or something, and they were two former engineers. And I was expressing the exact same sentiment. And his joke was, yeah, they're great for that, but just don't let them design food products because they think too linearly. And it's very much like you need this amount of this vitamin and this amount of that vitamin and put it all into the food. And I looked around at the time, and he was kind of right. Like, there's a few things that have been designed by former engineers. And I'm looking at it going, it makes a certain amount of sense, but the holistic element of it is completely missing, and that's what I find with engineers in general. It's like, it's very linear kind of thoughts, brilliant for
Yeah.
some stuff, but actually kind of missing a bigger picture in other ways.
Yeah. But I suppose if it helps you to find the flaws and things, then
Yeah, exactly.
it's a
Yeah,
step in the right direction, isn't it?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, we're better off with them in the game than not in
Yeah,
the game.
absolutely. So now you've written a book, and the title of your book is powerful. Getting pregnant when the body says no. So what do you mean the body says no? What do you mean by that?
Okay. It was actually inspired by a Gabor Mate book title. Although I'm going to blank on it now, but it was When the Body Says No as part of the title. Um, it'll come back to me later on. But the body says no is a way of saying that. Oh no, sorry. His book was called When the Body Keeps the Score. I think I'm right there.
Yes,
And
that's it. Yeah.
um, so it was like the body keeps the score, as in all the insults that happen to your body over its lifetime, injuries, emotional traumas, nutritional deficiencies, no matter what it is, it's all remembered in some sense. And so the body is kind of holding a score. That's what that book was about from an emotional perspective. It was a very powerful book actually about trauma. But then it was like I was thinking around the same time that it's the body is you're trying to get your body to do something like a it probably feels more this way for a woman than a man. I think they're trying to get their body to get pregnant, hold on to the pregnancy, and have a baby. The most natural thing in the world, but it just won't do it. And I think a lot of people think that it's sort of it's just like random. It's like random. Why can't I do it? Why can't I get pregnant? And I'm kind of saying, because your body's saying no, but there's a reason behind why it's saying no. And ultimately the book delves into the reason. Ultimately, there's lots of possible reasons. And I think if I hope the book did one thing for people, I know this treads a fine line between overwhelming people and kind of informing them, but I think it helps to realize that it's a big, complex, potential subject. Now, an individual person's infertility journey might be relatively straightforward. Maybe they've got a thyroid problem and that's the road you go down.
Mhm.
But when you don't know what the problem is and you put them all on the table, there's a lot of different things that can cause infertility. And so I tried to capture that in the book. And so I was kind of hoping that people would be able to look through it and go, oh, this is the bit I have, or that's the bit I was diagnosed with, or that's how that works. That's what endometriosis is. Now I kind of understand it better. And then I kind of built on to it afterwards by saying there's actually sort of an underlying theme song to all of the different conditions, which of course is chronic inflammation. And I know that's a very simplistic way of thinking about it, but it's not wrong. You know what I mean? It's not it may not explain everything, but it's not wrong, and it's the most useful place to start to sort of, especially if you don't know what the problem is. If all you did was address underlying chronic inflammation in the body, you'd be making progress even in the dark, so to speak, which is better than just waiting until you find out. So that's what it was about basically. It's like here's what's driving, here's what the conditions are, here's why they keep you infertile, and here's an underlying driver behind them. And I also put in some thoughts on the actual medical kind of treatment of some of those conditions, just so people could tie it together in their mind.
Great. So then it wouldn't just be for the couple looking to get pregnant, but even a practitioner could gain some value from that.
Yeah, possibly. I think like a seasoned practitioner would probably be nodding along, going, "Yeah, I understand what he's saying. Yeah, I understand what he's saying," and maybe they'll pick up some valuable tips. I mean, I don't go into like depth on technical stuff. I kind of give overviews of the technical stuff, so it's for the public. But yeah, some practitioners have bought it and they
Mm.
seem to like it. I guess one of the areas that I ended up focusing a lot on was the kind of psycho-emotional side of infertility, because I actually think that's very much it's well known, but it's not much talked about, especially in the nutrition world, and almost not talked about at all in the medical world. It's like, but I've seen it so many times. It's actually it's quite powerful to see it happen in people, that they have a sort of an internal realization about themselves or about their relationship,
Mhm.
and maybe they go and get therapy for that. Maybe they get psychotherapy. Maybe they get one of what you and me would know as like energy therapies that help them to kind of release something, say something that they're not saying, or address something that they're not addressing. And there can be very profound shifts there. And I tried to explain that in the book, because I think some people find people who don't understand it, and I know this from my own friends and from just people that I talk to. When you talk about emotional or energetic kind of healing, they just have nothing to latch it onto in their mind. But I try to connect the sort of emotional, let's say, let's say traumas that people had. It doesn't have to be traumas, but sort of emotional stresses that they're under or have been living under for a long time. I connect that to how it tones the nervous system in a way that keeps it on alert. And it's the toned, alert nervous system ultimately that sort of dictates the, I don't know what's it like for me. It like kind of dictates the pattern of the body. So if your nervous system is on alert for a threat of some sort, whether that was a threat that happened 10 years ago, from a
Right.
car accident or whatever it might be, from abuse, or you just an internal sense of feeling not enough, which is so common. Um, it's like as if it creates this sense of like, I'm not ready to be pregnant yet. You know what I mean? In the body,
Yeah.
and directs, and the knock-on effect of that is physiological, and you can sort of measure like a chronic activation of stress hormones. We can run tests and stuff like that, so you can kind of see it eventually. So I try to connect the stuff that's hard to see, like emotional problems or psychological, even belief systems that are like, I'm not worthy to be a parent. That kind of a belief system. I try to connect that in the book to a physiology thing that you can talk about and even to some extent test.
Yeah. So I suppose for some people that could be a little bit of a change because they'll be used to getting tests done, hormone tests that look normal,
Mm.
yet they're normal, yet we're not conceiving. So you mentioned the energetic, psychological side. So what other common reasons could there be that the body would resist conception?
Yeah. A lot, I think. And I think you could probably split that between the man and the woman almost kind of separately. Like,
Mm.
um, how maybe rephrase the concept as, so I think what you're asking me is like, how come lots of tests, the tests you do, how come they look normal, but there's still something wrong underneath and it's not showing them up? I mean, one way to think about that is, you either you just haven't got the right tests, um, or you can think about it in a sort of a deeper way, like that there actually isn't tests for some of the things that we know about. There's not tests that are publicly available. Like, for example, there's I'll just give you a kind of a far out example for a minute, at least an unusual example. Like, there's university research centers that research in depth, the health of a sperm, and they have sort of magnetic images of it, and photonic images of sperm and egg meeting and giving off this photonic signal that they're able to capture. It's fascinating stuff, but it's deep research and it costs hundreds of thousands to do these kind of tests. So they're not available to the public, but they are getting closer to being able to say, you know what, this is where I think it's going to go. Just say for sperm alone, you know what, the guy did a sperm test. Everything looked kind of fine. Actually, if I forget, I'll come back to the sperm test in a minute. But
Okay.
so you take a you take a sperm from that, bring it to one of these university research centers, and they look at it and they go, yeah, actually the photonic signature is very weak, but actually on a medical test, it looks fine. And right there, you've got the difference. And so we just know in theory that's the case. Obviously, hardly anybody gets these tests, but we know in theory, excuse me, we know in theory that this can happen. And so the way I think about that is, um, you can. It's almost the same analogy as, people are walking around, and if you met them on the street, they say they're healthy.
Yeah.
But if you're a natural health practitioner or a nutritionist, within 5 minutes of talking to them, you can realize, well, they've got chronic issues. But they say they're healthy, and the common parlance is like, "Yeah, I'm healthy," or so and so died of a sudden heart attack, but he was healthy. And it's like, yeah, I know it looks like that, but actually, if you dug deeper under the surface, you'd see that his arteries were being clogged up over the years, or whatever it was, and it just didn't show up on a test.
Yeah.
My, my,
Yeah.
my own father's a classic example. He got a heart attack, and the last 5 blood tests that he did were perfect, and he didn't even have high cholesterol, nothing. He just got a sudden heart attack. Um, and also, he ended up getting vascular dementia. None of that showed up on a test. For years and years, the doctor was saying these tests were fine. So he's actually a classic example of it. Um, I guess I'm kind of mixing two concepts there. One is that you can get tests for problems and they don't show the problems, and the other is that there isn't actually tests for some of the things that would really tell you if you were healthy. And
Yeah.
somewhere sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, go finish your thought. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle there. I think you and me would both be familiar with the kind of more functional testing.
Mhm.
Somewhere in the middle, it's capturing more than the standard test. Um, so you're looking at metabolites in the body from organic acid testing or something like that. But that's kind of a complicated idea. But I guess for therapists, that's where we sit. We sit in the kind of in the middle between the bleeding edge of testing versus what's there at the moment. And somewhere in there, I believe ultimately we'll be able to test and find most of the problems. But like just for example, there's this thing called there's this thing called capacitation for a sperm, right? And what it is after ejaculation, after it enters the cervix and travels up through the womb and meets the egg in the fallopian tubes, there's this sort of a sudden energetic change that it sort of goes through, and they call it capacitation. And it has to sort of like go. It's not exactly like a metamorphosis, but it's sort of an internal energetic shift that changes the enzymes within it to make it able to fertilize the egg.
Mhm.
But that capacitation can be measured at these research centers, and you can see whether it's vibrant or kind of weak. But actually, the sperm would have looked fine on a regular sperm test. So my take on that, and I know I've only answered your question about men for the minute, but my take on that is, even if your sperm test looks good, it's almost certain that there's a lot more you can do to improve the vitality of the sperm. So I do think, unfortunately, a lot of men, when they get a sperm test and it's fine, they kind of go, "Oh God, I'm off the hook." But I just don't see it like that anymore. I used to see it like that, but I don't anymore. I see it as, no, there's like 5 or 6 things that you need to be doing, um, just for yourself, like just for your own body. But aside from the fact that in most cases the woman is doing most of the work, aside from the fact that it's actually really good for the couple, for the man, even if the sperm test looks fine, to be on the same train of thought, on the same page, working on himself as his wife or girlfriend is working on herself. I just think it makes for a much better sort of energy between them. But so there's a couple of reasons for why a man should actually continue to stay away from, I guess, unhealthy activities like smoking and staying up late and eating junk food, and eating good food. It's for himself, for his sperm, for his offspring, and for his relationship. Like, there's a whole lot of reasons, even if your sperm test is fine. That's kind of the way I think of it. But I'm only just picking on a couple of the ideas there. There's for women, Jesus, the women are definitely more complicated to run tests on, and I guess even within the ecosystem of regular medical tests that a woman can do, from ultrasounds, to look for the health of your ovaries or the shape of your womb, looking for problems. Even then, stuff that's there gets missed. Um, and I have a current client at the moment who turned out to have what's called a septate womb, which is essentially it's kind of a fibrous growth in the middle of the womb. So if
Mhm.
you looked at the womb from the outside, the womb looks normal. But if you put a camera into it, you'll see that there's a sort of it looks like a kind of a heart shaped, or it's kind of like I don't know if you can see my hands on this, but it's like, it's a kind of a bulging fibrous growth on the womb. And essentially what that's doing is, depending on the size of it, it's sort of pushing in on the internal space of the womb. So it's making it less hospitable, or even narrowing the size of it. And you should be able to pick them up on certain ultrasounds. But this particular current client that I have, it was completely missed until she went for an endometriosis workup, and then they saw it. And in fact, they saw it using an ultrasound, the same type of ultrasound that had been performed on her by her own doctors. This was a different clinic she went to. And one person saw it and the other person didn't. So, like, even within that, I think a lot of stuff gets missed. And she had to get surgery on that, where they kind of just shave away that kind of bulge on the inside of the womb. And I don't know, hopefully we'll see. But it happens a lot. So there's just lots of reasons um, why tests can look normal and yet people can still not get pregnant. And at that, I'm maybe kind of answering a parallel to your question, but some tests that should be done don't get done. Like it's so common now for me to meet a female client, and she could be 3 years trying to get pregnant and having done IVF, and they haven't done a tubal patency test, which is to see if the fallopian tubes are open. And of course, why don't they do them? Because you don't need them to be open for IVF. But wouldn't it be nice to know if that was the issue? And and they don't do it. And just for the listeners, if they don't know what I'm talking about, the tubal patency test is, there's a couple of different ways to do it, but essentially you can fill the womb with a liquid, a blue dye in some cases, and then you do either ultrasounds or even X-rays, and you watch as you fill it up, and it should fill the womb up with the blue dye and eventually spill out through the fallopian tubes into the pelvic cavity, and that tells you that it's open. It's a very sort of simple concept test, um, but it's amazing how often it's not done.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's not amazing because because I
Right.
I I see it every day in the clinic when you're talking about testing, and the most common thing you hear is when I ask him, well, what did your doctor say? And the common thing, yeah, yeah, my tests were fine, or I did full blood tests, or the tests were fine or normal. So one, yes, right. Did they do the right test? Because we're assuming, oh, these are all the tests. And then you look at it and I'm going, well, what about A, B, C, D, E, F, and G? They're missing.
Yes.
You mentioned cardiovascular issues, and I see that quite frequently. And then you'll see the standard cholesterol markers, and I'm like, okay, where's the rest of it?
Mm,
This is only one aspect, and half of these don't even really matter, which really boggles people's minds, right?
yeah.
But it's almost they're taking the eyes off the villain, and putting it on somebody else there.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
so
I'm
yeah,
amazed.
getting
I'm amazed how difficult it is to get a basic fasting insulin test within the system.
it's astounding. It's something that I always do. It's a standard on my tests that when I conduct them, because without that, you cannot calculate so many other variables there, and it's extremely important. I'm even finding now you don't even see glucose hardly anymore. It's maybe I only see it 10% of the time now. So again, who's the villain? Is it the cholesterol or is
Yeah.
it the sugar,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
see that permeating through our food pyramids and everything where, I was just looking at the US food pyramid the other day and I'm like, when the heck did the base of the food pyramid go to 6 to 11 servings of grain-based carbohydrates? It definitely wasn't like that when I was a kid, which was a while ago, but anyways, it's so yeah, getting the right test done extremely important. To get in the right area there.
There is a common one. I should maybe mention it for people because it's so common. But um, like endometriosis, I think is probably the second most common condition that women with infertility will have. PCOS being probably the most common one.
Hmm.
And of course, you can have both. But endometriosis, unfortunately, is difficult to figure out because it actually requires a laparoscopic surgery. So you don't want to be drilling holes in people unnecessarily. So I mean, I get that there's a reluctance to do that, but still, there's there's all kinds of symptoms like painful bowel movements, painful sex, um, pain. Just general pain. Like pain is the most. It's actually not the most common symptom, but it will be one of the most reported symptoms because of its, the visceral nature of it. Um, but I have found over the years that I, sometimes it seems like glaringly obvious to me based on symptoms that they probably have endometriosis. Sometimes it's not so obvious, and you're trying so many different things, and if it's not working, it's like, you know what? Why don't we get an endometriosis test? And that's a bit of a lift because I have to sort of convince isn't the right word, I guess, but sort of convince the client to go to their doctor and convince the doctor that they should do surgery on them, even though it doesn't look like there's a really good reason other than you've tried so many other things. But often it's there, you know,
Yeah.
and especially if this is just for anyone listening, so they know, like if you have a sister or a mother with endometriosis, there's a much higher chance that the symptoms you have are probably also endometriosis. And one of the good things about medicine in this case is that they can actually go in, look at it, and even cut it off or laser it away. it can be quite effective. So that's one of the good, one of the good tests you can do, but it's rarely done. My point being, you can have unexplained infertility for years, but actually, if you look for endometriosis, it might explain it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I would look at these things when you talk about pain and endometriosis and the various conditions there, they're inflammatory. And
Mm,
so if they're inflammatory, I always say, well, you don't get inflamed for no reason. If you get inflamed, it's reacting to something. So we need to figure out, well, what are you reacting to? And I think that's where, going back to the tests, that's where a lot of tests miss out because they're not even testing for reactive or inflammatory markers. Like I see blood tests, I don't even see a single inflammatory marker on there. I'm going, well, how the heck are we going to how are we going to figure down or narrow down or rule something out,
yeah,
on what the potential issue is?
yeah. You're talking about what, like something like erythrocyte sedimentation rates or high sensitivity C-reactive
Yeah,
protein, that kind of stuff.
ESR, even insulin can be in its own
Insulin in
way.
itself, yeah,
Hemoglobin A1C is inflammatory, and some people will assume just because that's elevated that they have diabetes, and no, it doesn't. It
yeah,
can
no,
be inflammatory all by itself,
no.
So I suppose there might be some different interpretations out there, but one thing I've noticed clinically when I'm seeing people come in, or I should say women come in with PCOS and endometriosis and the likes, there seems to be certain characteristics among them. Yes, stress and anxiety can be one of those things. So again, that is affecting the energetic areas there. But also when I examine their diet, it seems to be a lot of similarities with people that are having issues and with their diet. And what have you seen in that area?
In terms of what they're normally eating already.
Well, what may be perhaps a causative factor or contributing to that inflammation?
Mm, mm. Well, I mean, okay, I would do a diet analysis on every client, and um, what I tend to, what I try to look for initially is I try to connect it to some sort of digestive symptom, because for me, if there's digestive symptoms going on, regular ones, even if they're mild, they're still telling me something, and I kind of, I guess, and this is my bias, I guess, as a nutritionist. We believe that all disease begins in the gut. It's probably not technically true, um, but it's a good starting point. But like, so I'm thinking, like, if your gut is not working, so you can assess your gut in many ways. Are you pooping properly? And there's a way to check that on the Bristol stool chart is a simple way of doing it, other than getting tests. Are you bloated? Are you getting tired after your meals? There's a number of things before you even look at the food. And so what I try and do is I try and connect it to the symptoms and go, okay, you see all these things that are happening with you? They're telling you something. This is your body. This is maybe why your body's saying no, but it's actually telling you something else. It's not just saying no, it's saying, hey, look here, hey, look here, hey, look here.
Mhm.
And that gives people, I think, a sort of not even just a visual, but a visceral way to latch on to what might be happening in their body. So I promote very strongly the idea of kind of tuning into your own body just to feel it and notice what it is. And I use myself as an example of someone that used to be useless at that. Um, I literally had pain and didn't know. And when I say that to people, they can't understand how that's true, but it actually was true. I had pain. At some point I knew, but I ignored it for so long that I stopped knowing it was there. That was the IBS pain that I eventually kind of figured out. Um, but in terms of diet, I don't think we're as bad as America, uh, for sure, but I think we're kind of getting there. So, um, what's causing inflammation? One of the main things, I suppose, is the fat. I think the fat that people eat and the fat that people don't eat is causing inflammation. And by that, what I mean is, I think it's fairly well known now. This kind of omega 3, omega 6 imbalance. It's fairly well known even with the public, I think, to some extent, thanks to people like Udo Erasmus and his book, and he kind of really drove that forward. And so the idea, so just to explain that for people that are listening, so we have an inflammatory system in the body, and let's call it a pro-inflammatory process that the body necessarily goes through when it encounters damage or a threat or some breakdown of tissue. And there's a lot of reasons why you can be inflamed, but there's a whole process. You can measure in the blood. It's got to do with neutrophils and macrophages, and it's a characterized thing. And so there's a system that turns that on, and then there's a system that turns it off. And this is the thing I think that a lot of people don't get. And a lot of practitioners, including myself at the time, went, "Oh, wow, okay, I get it now." It's not like you just get inflamed and then it just sort of eventually peters out. It doesn't actually peter out. It has to be turned off actively. And so one of the main things that turns it off actively is these compounds that are made from the famous omega-3 fats. And people kind of equate omega-3s with fish oil. But you can get it from lots of places. But this omega-3 fat, it's turned into these compounds, and they are the sort of the activators of the anti-inflammatory, or the down-regulating the inflammation. And I think it's probably, I actually don't know if it's worse now or the same or better than past. I don't actually know, but I regularly see people who, when I do an omega-3 test on their blood, which is a very easy kind of home test to do, it's either low. Actually, some people are too high because they're taking really high doses. So some people have latched onto it, maybe in an over-the-top way. But it's it's low, and you can say, okay, that alone is telling you that you're struggling to turn off inflammation. But if you look at someone's diet, you can see whether or not they have omega-3 in their diet. Where do you get it from? Well, you do get it from fish, and particularly oily fish, but you can get it from plants. You get a different form of it from plants. But still, to some extent, plants and seeds and fresh, unprocessed oils from certain nuts and seeds will give you omega-3s. They'll also give you omega-6s. They tend to come together. And I think there's two things actually going on with the omega-6, which is worth unpacking. One is the volume of it that people are eating. It's a much higher volume than the omega-3. That ratio is possibly an issue, but the nature of the omega-6 is probably the big issue, because most of the omega-6s that people are eating are coming from cooking oil and vegetable oil, and it's do you know what's infuriating? I find it now. There's, for whatever reason, there's online influencers who are sort of pushing back against this idea that the processed seed oil is a bad thing. And lo and behold, my eldest son came into me one day and he went, "Hey, look at this guy, Dad. He says that the processed oil isn't bad, that they actually remove all the bad stuff and all the chemicals that are used to make it, they're all taken back out. So when you eat it, you're not eating the chemicals." And I was like, okay. That might all actually technically be true, but the final oil is still a problem, because you're absorbing oil when you eat oil, you absorb it into your cells. And oil, of course, is just liquid fat. Oil and fat are the same thing. But this is the bit I think that people should be interested to know. When you take nutrition into your body, there's an active process of building it into your cells. You break it down and then you build it back up again. But oil is kind of different. You kind of absorb the oil sort of intact, and then it just melds in with your cell membranes. So there's much less checks and balances going on when the fat that you eat becomes the fat in your body. And I'm talking about the cell membranes here. I'm not necessarily talking about like storage fat. That's kind of actively created by the body. So if you're overweight or you have visceral fat, that's actively created and stored. I'm talking about your cell membranes, which are mostly made of fat. So you have trillions of cells. So there's trillions of cell membranes, and you eat the fat, it melds with them. If it's the omega-6 fat, that's already sort of been denatured and cooked to death in the manufacturing process, that literally becomes part of your cells. So your cell membrane then becomes sort of less structurally, the structural integrity of it is affected. And the cell membrane is a very rich signaling area. It signals, hormones land on it and dock onto the cells, and that's how the hormones work. Nutrients come in and out through the cell membrane. So it's a highly active area. But that activity is degraded if a lot of that area is made up of this bad omega-6 fat. And because that's degraded, it sort of gives off a danger signal to the cell, and that danger signal ultimately propagates into inflammation. And so there's a direct arrow between these bad omega-6s and inflammation. So I suppose I'm saying two things about the omegas. One is there is a problem with the quantity of it. Even if it was good stuff, there's potentially still a problem with the quantity of it compared to the omega-3. But definitely if it's bad stuff, It's just bad. It's just causing inflammation in itself. So that's one of the first things I would look for in clients. And the next bit, I think, I know you'd be familiar with this idea, and thankfully more and more practitioners are aware of this, but it's still not really fully accepted, and it's definitely not fully accepted by the public. But the fat that we demonize the most, this is I mentioned my Weston Price kind of influence earlier. This is them sort of coming through my brain right now. The fat that we demonize in the world the most, which is saturated animal fat, we demonize that because it's supposed to cause cholesterol and heart disease, which I think, as you know, you even had Malcolm Kendrick on your show recently.
Yeah.
He wrote the book on it. There's a real problem with that whole theory, but we demonize it. So people eat less of it. But actually, when it comes from good, healthy animals, that fat is stabilizing to your cell membranes. So the very problem that the omega-6s are causing on the cell membrane is kind of the antidote to that is the saturated fat. And so it's naturally anti-inflammatory. Basically, it resists what we call oxidation. Oxidation is a sort of a chemical process of degrading the fat. It reacts with chemicals basically, but saturated fat is less reactive. It resists it, so it's naturally inherently stable. And that's kind of the two main things I look for at the start. That's my fat sort of analogy, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
The other side of the diet, of course, as you mentioned earlier, the base of the food pyramid, which as we should all know, the information's available, but do we all know it? I don't know, but we know the food pyramid was created with the thing in mind was like how do you ensure food security for a global population, which I grant is a very difficult thing to do. It's not an unreasonable thing to do, but actually they accented the entire thing towards what they were able to produce in the country. So it was like an economic decision more than a health decision. And I think the Department of Agriculture famously was behind the creation of the food pyramid, not the Department of Health, which kind of tells you something.
Uh,
Not that I'd inherently trust the Department of Health either, mind you, but still the concept of it is something. But so the base of the food pyramid is grains, a lot of it, and and carbohydrates. And yes, you can have complex carbohydrates, but you can have simple carbohydrates, and they're all sort of represented on the food pyramid. And it's funny to talk about the food pyramid, because I've never in my life met somebody that said, "Oh, I eat this because the food pyramid says so." Nobody ever says that, but actually,
yeah.
we all do eat the way the food pyramid says to eat by default, because it's kind of baked into the shopping system. It's baked into the school lunches. It's baked into the overall idea. So the economic engine just got behind that thing, and by default, that's what most people do eat that way, even though they don't consciously eat that way. But ultimately, you end up eating a lot of sugars, carbs, and less fat. So you're eating, so you're driving inflammation through the intake of an excessive amount of carbohydrates. That's kind of the other main thing I look at.
Yeah.
And
Well, the body's not really built with that. When you look at biochemical composition, with water probably being the largest component, all your solid structures are mainly, you can look at every main system in your body, it's proteins and fats.
mm,
Yet people have interchanged that with carbohydrates. And so no wonder we're having so many issues and problems, and especially metabolic conditions.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's definitely there's a place for carbohydrates, like our energy system in the mitochondria. It can burn all three of the fuel: proteins, fats, and carbs, but it kind of preferentially burns some carbs. There's an argument that you need some carbs to sort of have the system running easily enough, and especially actually for women. I think it's more. It's not guaranteed, but it's more likely that if you took 100 men and women and you put them all on a very low carb diet, some people won't agree with that, and most likely most of them will probably be women because of the effect it has on your hormones. So I aim to get my clients on a lower, but not necessarily clinically low carbohydrate diet. I say that knowing full well that people's lives have been transformed on a low carbohydrate diet, a very low, like a ketogenic diet. So I'm
Yes.
not trying to diss the idea, but I'm saying as a general sort of concept for most people, it's not that you have to like completely cut out carbs, but we're just taking in way too much of them. So if you kind of lower the amount and you increase your protein a little bit, like protein intake tends to hover somewhere around the sort of a median number for people. So even if you eat less carbs, you tend to eat more fat, and if you eat more carbs, you tend to eat less fat. But kind of people more or less eat a similar amount of protein, except for some people. But I still think that similar amount needs to be increased a bit for fertility, um, because of basically because protein is driving the construction of your body, and it's also it's stabilizing your system. I just think they need a little bit more than most people aim for. And so for me, that's meat and eggs. Meat, fish, and eggs is the kind of main way to get that. And there's a bit of a pushback on that because of the thing I mentioned earlier, because people talk about animal foods bad for you. And I'm like, yeah, no, for the 100th time, no, it isn't.
Well, I think again, when you look at hormonal biochemical pathways and the like, and you see actually, well, what ingredients are actually really feeding into the hormonal pathway and making your master hormone and that, and it always seems to be the same things. It's coming back to your B vitamins, your cholesterols, your LDLs. They're the building blocks. Yet we've been meat's being demonized, fat's
Yeah.
being demonized, and it's probably been doing that for the last 70, 80 years. So people, even though they still kind of hear it, it's ingrained in them because we've been brought up with it. So it's kind of hard to change that with people, uh, unless you really get them to, hey, try this for 30 days. How do you feel? And then
Yeah.
all of a
Yeah.
sudden, yeah, I'm
Well,
feeling better. My skin's cleared up, or I don't feel as inflamed. My gut isn't sore. I'm pooping regularly
mm,
and solidly. Yes, we have to talk about poop. Yeah.
yeah, of course we have to. Yeah. Yeah, but exactly, yeah, and you're talking about being able to read the feedback from your own body, which a lot of people aren't really good at that. It's something you have to practice to do. So you have to, it helps to develop a confidence for saying, I was feeling like this, and then I changed, and now I'm feeling like this. You have to realize that you're feeling different, which some people don't. And I was one of those people. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was in pain. Um, but you have to realize it and you have to notice it. And then you've got to say, oh, it's connected to that. So every time I go off it and I go back eating that stuff again, the same problem happens. When I come back to the proper diet that suits me, this happens. That builds a bit of confidence in you to say, yeah, 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 okay, I'm going the right way. But you have a very important point that you said about that the cholesterol and the animal foods, it's in people's psyche. I I believe that ties back to an evolutionary concept of we, we we're programmed to focus on danger more than safety, for obvious reasons, for survival reasons. We see patterns in the bush. Is that a lion coming at us? We're tuned into something that will save our lives, and and that's the way we're built, and we can't help that. Our nervous system is sort of wired to respond to that. I mentioned the tone of the nervous system earlier. That's one of the things. If you tell somebody that something is dangerous, they have no choice but to focus on it. And so the, I think the I think the statin industry has done a great job of that. They've told people that this cholesterol thing is dangerous. And I don't think it really matters to people. Maybe temporarily they'll walk out of a clinic and go, oh, okay, I feel a bit better about that now. So long as I'm cutting down my sugar and my insulin and my inflammatory markers, maybe I don't have to worry about the cholesterol. But a week later, like someone says to them about cholesterol again, and they're like, oh crap, yeah, I still have the high cholesterol. Maybe I'm going to get a heart attack tonight. You're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard
Yeah.
to scrub that one from the nervous system.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's like I say, it's conditioning, and many people were born into that conditioning. So, you really need to fall into it some way or
Mm,
experience it. And unfortunately, a lot of people, when they've had serious health issues and challenges, and that's really what's led them to get the resolution there. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. Um, Geez, I was going to say something and I just skipped my head, but nevertheless, we'll move on.
yeah.
So, okay, so. We've discussed a few things where tests sometimes look normal and the body could be hormonally capable of pregnancy, but neurologically unsafe.
Mm,
So, what signs tell you that the nervous system is suppressing fertility?
okay. Um, well, I would say the answer to that is probably not necessarily nutrition centric. It's more psychology and even looking at someone's posture or the way they talk. You get a sense of whether someone's living fast or something. There's a lot of different ways, and I'm sure there's. I very much I'm interested in all that other stuff. Like I crack this joke a lot to people that like actually what I should have really studied was psychology. I say this about all nutritionists. I say we should have all studied psychology first because that seems to be where a lot of the change is happening, and the understanding of the mind. I just find it fascinating. But um, what tells me if the nervous system is activated, even if I can't, physically assess somebody and go, oh, look, your shoulders are tight, there's your abdomen is, you're holding tension in your body. Even if I can't do that, um, you can kind of intuit it from a lot of ways people talk. So, like, to me, I ask clients all these questions all the time over time. Not all in one go, but I try to find out things like, is your relationship going good? Do you like your job? Um, you can't always ask. Someone doesn't always know if they have trauma, but I think a lot of people have trauma from, even if it's small. Some people have small, like one-off things, or a lot of people have more kind of complex trauma. Um, and ultimately, if I talk to them enough about uh, their life, like what I mean is, I would do an assessment, and then over time, I'm communicating with the client, and I'm asking them questions, and I'd pop in a question here or there. If I got some sort of sense, like for example, what would give me a sense that there's more to delve into is maybe we agreed that there was a relatively simple diet change that the person had to do, and they said they do it. And then they're like, yeah, I did it for a week, but then I couldn't stay on it. I'm like, okay, well, we'll try again. And they might try again. Then they can't stay on it. I'm like, okay, there's something else driving them not being able to stay on the diet. So I sort of tend to dig in a bit there. I mean, I don't go full Jordan Peterson on it. I'm not like a psychologist, but like I'm trying to find out just by normal talk what's going on. And inevitably, people are carrying lots of different issues. If they start talking about it, they'll talk about it. Relationship issues are a big thing. And what I find is all those, like a relationship issue, even if it's just a background doubt, of like, I don't really know if I'm in the right relationship, but I'm kind of making it work. Like,
Mm.
that to me is a tension on your nervous system. And maybe it just needs a conversation to be solved, or maybe it needs, something deeper. So I actually regularly send clients to couples therapy, for that kind of idea. But other than that, physiologically, I kind of find like you can't know for certain. You can't necessarily say for certain X, excuse me, X equals a nervous system that's on alert. But if you know the Bristol Stool Form Scale, it's a thing that it's part of my program. All of my clients are. I explain it to them. I get them to look at it. I say, okay, we're talking about poop. Um, Actually, we need to talk about poop, as you said. Like I'll get one of the things I say to all my clients is you need to assess the morphology, the shape of your stool, at least for a few days, and then make some changes, and then come back and assess it again. You don't have to do it every day, although you kind of can. You can kind of get into the idea of it. But I find like if you're constipated, or if you have the opposite, which is diarrhea, or if you've got alternating between one and the other, to me, that means your nervous system is going to have some sort of, it's going to be on alert in some way because something's wrong, and it's like either you're eating foods that you're intolerant to, or there's an infection in your gut, or you're actually worried, psychologically worried about something, and it's creating a tension in your nervous system. Um, or actually, one a few times I've noticed one thing when it happened twice, I kind of started adding it into my questionnaire, which was whiplash injuries that people just happened to randomly mention that they had. And I went, oh, okay. So whiplash can actually kind of upset the nervous system and the thyroid, believe it or not.
Mm.
So I've been looking for signs like this. So it's a very holistic sort of view, and it's so how would I deal with what I consider to be a nervous system issue? And I know I have to use the phrase kind of loosely, like it's a psycho-emotional sort of nervous system. It's the whole thing. It's I'm like one of the tools that has become well used lately is breath work. And luckily enough, my own brother Ronan actually is involved in breath work. So I kind of send clients onto his program, and do you know what's funny? I um whatever it is about breath work, Uh, and he takes them through. There's a weekly thing I think they do. They kind of lie down, put headphones on, they go through a whole system. Uh, I've done it. It's actually really good. But the the people come back and they say, "Oh my God, I did a weekend. Listen to your brother," and my mind is transformed, and I'm like, right, okay, so I'm working with you for a year, like, and all you're saying to me is, "Oh, thanks, Brendan." Whereas you're transformed after a night with my brother, like,
Yeah.
that happens so much. It's a joke. But my point being, breath work is kind of powerful for helping people sort of tune in to their bodies, and it's sort of a nervous system reset. So I'm delighted that that's available. But that's kind of where I go with it, and but it's like I don't know if I don't really have conversations specifically to people saying, "Oh, I think your nervous system's off. You need to go and do this." Instead, I'm looking at a pattern and I'm thinking, you know what, you seem a little bit stressed. This might help you, or but I'm working on the nutrition side of things first because I firmly believe that if you're eating foods that to which you're intolerant, um, or allergic, but allergic is more easy to kind of detect. The intolerant one is way more common. So you're eating foods that for some reason they either bind you up or you lack an enzyme like lactase or something to digest the sugar in the milk, and it gives you diarrhea, or maybe you can't process gluten properly. Something that you're intolerant to will create an effect in your digestive system, and that will give you visible as well as visceral symptoms. And I kind of tend to work on them as long as I can to try and sort them out. And it's when I'm getting to the end of that and it's like, still a little bit more to go. I'm not exactly sure that we can keep pushing the diet or keep restricting it or adding in new stuff. Then I'm starting to think, okay, let's talk about referring you to some other therapist and let's see if we can get your nervous system to calm down. That's kind of the way I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's kind of an underlying current that I'm seeing here. It's really, yes, there's nutrition and all the other facets that are in there, but ultimately it's really about the body feeling safe.
That's exactly it. That's exactly how I put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and and actually you can say that at a kind of a macro level and a micro level. And even in the book, I kind of, the analogy I use for the digestive system in the book was that it's like a fortress. And why is it a fortress? Because we're taking in stuff from the outside, we're eating it, it's going down into our body, and there's a containment system around it, which is our digestive system. And yes, that's got to extract nutrition that we need, but it's also got to make sure that there's stuff in there that could be harmful that doesn't get into our bodies. And so there's a fortress wall built around it, um, which is a mix of uh, immune cells that surround the gut, nerve cells that surround the gut. It's bundles of nerves. In fact, there's like there's I think there's more nerves there than there is in the brain, or so. It's like the second brain they call it. And so we've got lots of sensory equipment going on there, and we've got lots of bacteria inside the gut, which are helping us, but then there's some that can be harming us. So there's this like extraordinary level of surveillance going on all the time. And how it even accomplishes the job, it's a mind-boggling process of how it accomplishes the job. So it's like billions of molecules are coming through, and it's like, you're safe, you're safe, you're safe. Oh, you're not safe. You mightn't be safe. And we have immune compounds that tag them. We even secretory IgA. We secrete, antibodies into on top of the food to neutralize stuff, and all of that. If if you're constantly eating something that doesn't agree with you, you're going to be constantly fighting that. You're going to be constantly taking energy away from the rest of the body to fight that. And ultimately, you can describe that as your body doesn't feel safe. Even if psychologically you're not like worried about some danger, although that's also a thing.
Yeah.
Um, you can be worried, you can have background worries about, like I mentioned before, like I'm not ready for pregnancy, or I'm not good enough to be pregnant, or trauma from your own childhood, or whatever it might be. That's a thing in your mind. But even in the gut, I think it's like, it's fair to refer to it as a system that's activated around danger. And what you're looking for is a balance. You're looking for it to be able to go, oh, I spot some danger. I've dealt with it. Now we'll go back and relax again. Oh, look, there's more danger. I've dealt with it. Let's go back and relax again. But if it's constantly coming in danger, constant eating of food that that you're intolerant to, well, it's constantly activated for danger. So it's constantly, there's this constant sense in your nervous system, and literally in your nervous system, in this case, not an analogy, because the vagus nerve is connected from your brain to your gut, and it's kind of relaying signals up and down. And you're constantly relaying signals back to the brain saying, no, there's something wrong here. Send more resources, send more resources. And that's a kind of a theme actually I explored in depth in the book, which is the priority system for the body. This is a crucial idea. I think that I don't think enough people talk about. The priority system for the body is survival. And once you survive, and so if you're under threat in any way, even in a slight way, your body will provision resources to deal with the threat. And so that's taken as a priority. If you're constantly, even slightly feeling unsafe or threatened, or that will manifest as chronic inflammation in some way in the body, that's your body constantly pumping resources, meaning literally vitamins and minerals and energy, to the area that it thinks it needs to have to fight whatever the threat is. Whether that's your muscles or your digestive system or wherever it thinks the threat is, it gets focused there. But the point is that it gets taken away from everywhere else. So there's a kind of there's a hierarchical system of, you could call it energy sort of distribution, and the bottom of it is like survival. And as you move up to the top, somewhere moving up to the top, you'll find the fertility system. So people will say, oh, I would have thought the fertility system was like a mad, crazy high priority for the body. And it actually isn't. It's a high priority for the species, but it's not a high priority for the individual. And so from a species perspective, it's a bit like, I know it's a very dispassionate way to think about it, but it's like bacteria. It's like we produce billions of bacteria and most of them will live, but lots of them will die. But from a species point of view, that's success. It's kind of the same with us. The kind of genetic impulse is for the human race to survive. But like if an individual has to die along the way, that's not really an issue from a species point of view. And that's the way to think about the energy. So you as an individual, if you're battling something, whether it's a chronic infection or low nutrient reserves or constant worry about your job or your life or your purpose or your relationship, anything like that, you're going to be diverting resources to deal with that. And you'll be diverting them away from your fertility system, literally away from your ovaries, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. And you summed it up really well there. And that's really what we have in modern living times, because it's just not the food that we eat. It's the environment, it's the relationships, it's the 5G floating through the air. It's toxic. Yeah, we said relationships. Toxicity can come from food, chemicals, but also relationships. We've heard that phrase around. I know
Yeah.
often when I have patients in my office, I will lean over and I'll look into their laps. They're probably wondering what I'm doing. And I go, is that a phone in your pocket? And then they'll go, yeah. And I'm going, get that out of there. I says, you're microwaving your reproductive organs. I said, and
Yeah.
then you're wondering when we have problems. So these things have just become a part of our day-to-day life. And we assume that they're good for us because
Yeah.
people aren't dropping dead on the street right away. But it's more of that slow wearing down effect, right?
Yeah. Like I used to think of if I could jump from your point to sort of what I think is a related theme. Um, like if you walk into the supermarket, okay, I'm exaggerating, but you could walk in the front door healthy and walk out the back door with diabetes if you wanted to. And because there's so much stuff in there that just sweets and whatever, sugar, lovely stuff. I enjoy eating it every now and again, but it'll kill you if you eat a lot of it. And I kind of came to the point at one point I was like, this stuff is everywhere. Like it's in the kids' foods, it's in take-home meals, it's in, and again, I'm going to make a comparison to America. I still don't think we're anywhere near as bad as America. I really think America's in deep trouble. But but we have an echo of it going on over here. We're surrounded by stuff that is, it's designed to obviously hijack our brains and our dopamine system and our reward system, and we really like it. It's sweet, but it's slowly killing us. It's slowly causing inflammation. And I'm like thinking, is that the way it's got to be? Like, is it a case that we just have to have everything in the world available to us, and we've somehow individually got to develop our own sense of sovereignty and autonomy about, I'm living in a world where every step I turn, I could eat something or do something that's bad for me. And it all looks normal. So like, do I have to just own my own sense of purpose and my own sense of sovereignty and say, it's all there. The quality streets, they're there. They're only £3 for a box.
Mhm.
I could eat them all day long and it'd be cheaper than eating food. But I would die, and I'd die a horrible death too. So, and back to your point about the EMFs and stuff in the air, it's like, do we fight against it and say, let's change society and push all this stuff back out, which I think is trying to push the tide back out. I just don't think it's going to be possible. To some extent, you need regulations, sure, but I think ultimately what we need is some sort of sense of, it's everywhere. Just accept it and start putting in daily sort of habits and like set up your own environment. If you, to the extent that you can, set up your own environment so that you're at least shielding most of it from your life. And that's maybe the best you can do. And there's a flip side to that point, which is, so I'm talking about eating food that's bad for you, but also there's like toxins. There's literally toxins in the air. I didn't even get to mention that. I don't know if you've come across this idea, but there's now literally proof. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. I'll be more scientific about it. There's a correlation between a dramatic drop in sperm quality around the world and a rise in toxicity in the people's bodies, let alone in the environment. They've
Yeah.
proven that it's in the people's bodies. So it looks pretty cut and dry that the higher the toxicity, which is like forever chemicals and plastics and so on, has a direct relationship on the sperm quality of men. And it's literally fallen off a cliff over the years. Not literally, no, it's like figuratively fallen off a cliff over the years, but it's come down like 1% per whatever every couple of years. My point there being, probably the clothes we wear, probably the beds we sleep in, probably the utensils that we're drinking hot liquids out of, all of them are contributing in some small way to this toxic load. And you have a choice. You could become a hypochondriac about it, which would be very detrimental. But that wouldn't be an unreasonable sort of response when you think of how ridiculous it's become. It's just not a productive response. But the flip side the point I'm trying to make is, the only other way to deal with it, apart from shielding yourself as much as you can from it, is optimal nutrition. Is the thing that helps you detoxify it. So I think no matter what way you turn, I always start with the food. So if you're eating, I mentioned earlier, you need a bit more protein than normal. You need good fat. You need no bad fats. You need, some but not lots of carbohydrates. If your body is running efficiently, and of course you need sleep and you need water and all the other good stuff. If you're doing a lot of the basic stuff well, you'll detoxify. The odd person will be very lucky. They'll have unlucky. They'll have a compromised detoxification system. They'll be very sensitive to even small amounts of mold in the house. I don't tend to deal with these clients, but I know therapists who do. Some people genetically have a sort of, let's call it, it's probably the wrong word, but let's call it a weak detoxification system.
Yeah.
And they get overwhelmed easily. They really need optimal nutrition, but even then it mightn't be enough. But I'm saying for most people, I think we just have to accept the reality. That in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is, we have to accept the reality that we're living in a fantastic, but a very, very sort of broken in another way world, and we need to find a way to navigate it. And I think the only way to do it is personal awareness, personal sovereignty, I call it, over the food you choose to eat, the medicines you choose to take or not take, the indulgences, whether it's the sweets, the cigarettes, the vapes. That's
Yeah.
becoming a big thing. God, I actually read a very scary thing recently about a vape. I might come back to that in a minute. But All that stuff is all there, and so we're awash with it. Is my point, and like we could just drown in it, and I don't think it's ridiculous. It's probably not going to happen, but I don't think it's ridiculous to say that the human race's health will decline steadily over time, and eventually we'll just die out. I don't think it's ridiculous to think that that's a possibility. Um, okay, it's unlikely, but it's you know what I'm saying, because it's the stuff is everywhere, and we're creating fantastic stuff, but we're creating all this other stuff as a side effect of it. And um, I guess the way I deal with it is I don't over focus on it. I know it's there, and I try and set up my life so that I'm sort of free of most of it, and then I try and eat the right food and have good relationships and not be stressed.
Yeah.
That's about as good as I can do. That's what I get my clients to do.
I don't think anybody can be perfect in this area in this day and age.
No.
Obviously, there are things that are within your control, and there are going to be numerous things that are out of your control. But it's like you said, it's regulating that energy. Do I have more positive energy coming in than going out, and making the right choices with that? And I totally concur. The food is the major part, and I always tell people spend your money on eating the best quality food that you can. Um, Make sure you drink clean water, and what comes out of your tap is not clean water. Get clean water and invest in a sauna, because the sauna, what does that do? It helps open the detoxification pathways, right?
Mm.
So I think those are all things that we can do to help, and the rest, well, you do your best with, and if you keep your body strong and the system's working properly, then you will keep yourself in that anabolic state versus a catabolic state. So anabolic is building and growing, catabolic is breaking down. That's where you're essentially losing energy. And
Mm.
unfortunately, we see that way too much in this day and age. But, you know, it comes back to feeling safe and the stress. And I've mentioned this in previous talks before, and maybe it's a different way that I was trained, where modern medicine, or our current medical system, they will look at more of what we term as an upward causation model, looking at physically things and then other things coming from that, where really what we talked about today is really a downward causation model. So all those mental, emotional, psychological, even spiritual, going above that,
Mm.
when we are feeling unsafe in those areas and things go wrong, then they manifest them physically in the body. And that says, when you said all disease begins in the gut. Yes, on the physical side, that's where it manifests itself, right? Goes in the
Yeah.
gut. When you're stressed and nervous, what's the first thing people do? They go in the gut, or they throw up, or whatever. It all manifests itself in that area there. So yeah, so physically healing the gut, absolutely, but without feeling safe and doing those other, the mental, emotional side of things, that I don't think we ever really get there. I think that's important.
It's excuse me. The You mentioned I told you I was starting to work on a book for men. But there's a few reasons for that, but one of them, like I know a few guys who they're great guys. They work in factories. They work in kind of manual, tough jobs. They do their. I don't mean this as a joke. I mean this. I really mean this seriously. They do their manly job of bringing home the bread.
Hmm.
Um, they're honorable people, but I know from talking to them that their their life is structured and their minds and the mindset is structured. It's so far away from what we're talking about here that it's alien to them. And what they're concerned with is practical stuff like kids going to school, college, mortgages. The job itself, is the job fulfilling even at that? And they're lucky if it is, but it's often a road. Sometimes it's a road job. And my point being, I'm I really feel like somebody needs to reach out and help. I'm thinking of good guys here. I'm not thinking of like the asshole kind of guy that doesn't give a shit about anything.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the good guy who is not trained in what we're talking about here. Um, Probably like sees a lot about. They might see something on TikTok or whatever about toxins in the sperm or whatever, and they kind of whatever. It doesn't apply to me. Or it just doesn't connect. And the emotional stuff, like one of my friends only last week was telling me they work in a factory and like literally a fight broke out. And it's a factory with all men. Like there's about 10 guys working there. Excuse me. Um, and some order was given and it was taken up wrong and the guy fought back and started shouting at each other and there was a bit of fisticuffs and then it was like, oh, a big laugh at the end of it. He was telling me this story and I was saying, oh, I was seeing a pattern in it going, yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I'd speculate that the guy that reacted probably reacted to the boss that gave him the order. In his nervous system, the boss was his father, probably. So it was going back to father-son issues, which is very common. It's extremely common. And there's something you can do about that if you know that that's a problem. There's whatever you want to call it. There's trauma therapy, there's energy therapy, there's stuff you can do about that. But the idea of it is so alien to these people, to the guy I was talking about. My friend, like, he's like, yeah, okay, his father probably shouted at him, but like, what are you talking about? Why was he shouting? He shouldn't have been shouting at the boss. And I'm like, I know, but I'm just explaining to you that a lot of the impulses are coming from these deeper nervous system programming. And when I have those conversations, I kind of realize, we talk about the world, we talk about excess amounts of sweets in the shop, we talk about EMFs. God, it's so far from some people's minds. It's hard to get it through to people. Maybe they listen to something like this and go, okay, maybe that's what it is. What I believe is people learn when they need to, if they're aware that they need to. They learn from insight or they learn from experience, like the experience of pain or suffering or back pain or broken relationships or financial ruin, or maybe they have to go to jail, so some hardship, or they can't have kids. A hardship besets them, and that's what sets people on the path of I don't want to sound too flowery about it, but kind of a path of enlightenment, so to speak, or waking up. And that's what I think has to happen to people. So the friends that I'm describing, their lives are grand, but they have all these kind of problems, but they haven't a clue. They really haven't a clue. And I don't say that to slag them. They genuinely haven't a clue. And I'm trying to figure out, as I'm going through the research process for the book, I'm trying to figure out what is it that actually gets through to men? Because I'm a man, obviously, but I seem to think differently to most of my male friends, and
Yeah.
like even when I go to the pub with them and have a conversation, it's mm, it's not easy to get a conversation going about all the stuff we're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a saying I came across recently, something to the likes of sometimes our pain teaches us more than our successes.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely true.
Yeah.
But and again, I have to add in that you still need to be aware in order to learn. And I do. You've probably come across this idea before. There's a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. This kind of idea, and I think like the default human nature for the default nature for humans is actually a fixed mindset. It's like we kind of know the environment, we kind of know what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to hunt, we're supposed to gather, we're supposed to do this. That's what we're supposed to do. End of story. And the growth mindset is more suits the modern person, the modern life, where it's like actually there's lots more opportunities. You can learn about yourself. You can grow. You can adapt. You don't have to have the same issues that held you back when you were growing up or that held your parents back. Um, but shifting from one to the other, that's the key. I think that's the key. It takes awareness. It takes some sort of pain that has to push you, and ultimately, hopefully, it takes someone that can guide you a bit. And show you the way. And like I'm kind of hoping maybe the book could do that for some men that are lost, essentially lost when it comes to fertility. Like it's staggering. Say, just take this is a recent conversation as part of actually one of the research for the book. Um, like Viagra for erectile dysfunction doesn't work more often than it does. And yet, if you talk to people and regular people, they'll say, "Oh, well, if you have erectile dysfunction, you just take Viagra and it works." I'm like, no, it's actually not like pain medication. Like pain medication pretty much works most of the time.
Mhm.
But this other stuff doesn't. It's more complicated. So and if it doesn't work, my point being, if it doesn't work, there's literally nowhere for guys to go and go, "Oh, it didn't work. What'll I do next?" And even going to the doctor, there's very little that they'll ever be told. that could make a difference. And everything we've just discussed would make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So realistically, how long would it take somebody to rebuild their fertility once we address all these root causes that we talked about?
Yeah. Um, so the way I see it is you can have, you could be lucky and have one or two minor, so-called minor functional problems. Like maybe your progesterone's a bit low and you have a minor problem with your digestion. Or you could have an activated nervous system, uh, poor nutrient reserves, low progesterone, very high estrogen, high stress hormones, a thyroid that's not working, um, a job you hate, like, and all these problems, they compound on each other. And the way I think of it is, and I actually say this kind of stuff to clients, it's not like if you have one problem, it's not like if you have two problems, it's twice as bad as having one. It's more like, and three problems is three times as bad as having one. It's more like it multiplies the complexity. So if you have five problems, it's like 5 by 4 by 3 by 2. It's like, it's enormously more complicated for the body. I mean, for the body to sort through, because the body's dealing with multiple problems at the same time. So when it's complicated like that, it can take a while to tease it out, because the way I've come to see it is, I always start with what the stuff we've talked about. I start with digestion and food, because that drives a lot of the healing. And that actually, and if you fix that, it takes away a lot of the problems anyway. Um, but the body then has to recalibrate. So there's like, you make a change and then it takes some time to recalibrate. And the recalibration is easier if you're also addressing the other issues, like your relationship problem or your job problem or whatever else is bothering you. So if you address everything, like, you can't really address everything in one go, but if you kind of step by step start to focus on all the different major areas that are wrong, um, I, s- I think it takes, very rarely would it be less than 6 months for a woman in particular. I think it's fair to say women's fertility is way more complicated than men's. They may have to do the same things, but it's just more complicated because of the hormonal fluctuations every month, and they've different brains, and we have to respect that that's the way it is. Um, so I kind of think of it in terms of 6 months. Not the odd time there's 2 or 3 cycles and it works.
Yeah.
That's only the odd time though. Mostly for my clients, it's 6 months or more, and I have clients that have been with me for 2 and 3 years. It depends how complex it is. So it's like, you're testing, you're making tweaks, you're looking for the next thing, you're looking for the next most obvious thing. And I think sometimes for some people, they have to actually go through a whole year of it and go, oh, now I see what I'm doing. It's a pattern. I keep making the same mistake over and over again. And that's a learning moment. And then maybe they make a change. So yeah, it's a piece of string, unfortunately, answer, but I think people should, I actually make a point to say to my clients, your infertility issue might be easy to solve, but you should act like it's going to be really complex from the start. Act like it is, and you might be lucky, but at least, and if you're not, and it probably will be complex, at least your mindset is set up for it, and you're set up for a kind of a protracted journey.
Yeah. So
That's the way I think of it.
so in saying that, so then what mindset shifts are the most important for couples on this journey?
I definitely, the first one is to own the journey, own the responsibility of it. And I think what I find with people is their initial um, sort of introduction to fertility, it hits them first of all. Most people don't know that they have a problem until they have a problem. It's not like they're thinking, oh, I have this issue, I mightn't be able to get pregnant. Very few people are thinking that. Um, Maybe they know they have PCOS. Some people might know that already, for example. But most people, they run headlong into it and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I have infertility problems. And it becomes a journey. So the first thing I say to people is, so I think what people try to do is they try to solve it as fast as they can. So they go to the doctor and the doctor's like, okay, your hormones are low, I'll give you hormones or something. Grand, okay. My take on it is, your mindset shift needs to be, first of all, take full responsibility for the entire thing and for the outcome. So if it doesn't happen, you have to own that. And if it does happen, you can own that. And it's a funny one because you're talking about two people. This is one of the most unusual conditions because it involves two people. Even if only one of them is the problem, it still involves two people. But often both couples are partly contributing to the problem. So two people together have to navigate this difficult journey. And the mindset thing is like, you need to, I'm not saying don't go looking for help. I'm not saying don't go to a doctor for tests and ask people for advice. I'm not saying that. I'm saying own responsibility for what you're going to do from now on. Don't just like say, I have infertility, do something, you know? And I think because that's the most empowering thing. In fact, I think when you do that, you actually relax your nervous system when you do that, because you sit in the driver's seat of your life and you go, right, I don't fully understand all the science behind it, but I'm willing to learn. I don't have to learn the depth of the science. I just have to learn how I interact with it. To the extent that I understand it, that's all I have to learn. And the next thing is the next mindset I think that's really important is don't just try to get pregnant, but try to get pregnant healthily. So aim for a healthy pregnancy. That should be the goal, a healthy pregnancy.
Absolutely.
Why should it be the goal? For the simple reason that it's better for the child. And it's so much easier to raise a healthy child than a sick one. And sick children are, it's like chronic unwellness is on the rise in kids, from nasal congestion to colic to structural problems with their bodies, vision problems. They need glasses more earlier in life, hearing problems, grommets, allergies, skin conditions. It's all on the rise for kids. And it's very taxing on parents to have to deal with this. It's stressing and it's taxing. And I'm not saying you'll wipe it all out by, getting yourself pregnancy, but you'll certainly mitigate a lot of it by getting yourself healthy before you get pregnant. And that actually takes time. Um, I'm reluctant to say to my clients, you actually kind of need at least 2 years of a run-in, because they're already 2 years overdue in their mind and they don't want to do that. And I understand that. But the mindset should be, get myself healthy. Even if I don't understand why I'm not getting pregnant, get myself healthy so that the baby will be healthy. And the same for the man. That's actually something that's completely missed in conversations. But we now have pretty good published science on the connection between low sperm quality, even if it does end up creating when it does end up creating a pregnancy, and things like mental health problems in the children as they're approaching adolescence. So there's a long delay there before that's seen. And people have asked me the question, why specifically is it mental health problems that the kids are having when the sperm that's connected to poor sperm? And my answer is, it's actually probably all problems. It's just that's the one they've tested for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they've investigated mental health problems and sperm quality, and they found that there's a link. I'm pretty sure if they investigated any other health problems, they'd also find that there was a link. It's just that it's taken time to get the research. So health and ownership are the two main kind of front things that I say to people about your mindset.
Great. I've got two final questions for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So one, where can people find out about your book and learn more about your work? And is there anything you feel is still not being said loudly enough about fertility?
Well, my site is naturalfertilityconsultant.com. I have a page connected to the book off that, and I have a page connected to my program off that. You can get me on Instagram. I'm actually building, because I'm working on the book and I'm working on a program at the moment. I've pulled away from a lot of social media, but you can get me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook at Natural Fertility Consultant, in all those places. What are we not talking about? Is that what you said to me? What are we not talking about for fertility?
Well, what do you feel that's not being said loudly enough about fertility?
Preparation in advance of pregnancy. All of the healthy, and again, I thank Weston Price for this insight. This is a deep insight, deep research behind this. But one of the things about healthy societies, and I should point out, because people use people say things like, oh, traditional societies did this and they did that, so that's a good thing to do. But actually, most traditional societies are not healthy. That's a kind of a misnomer. There's very few, and when Weston Price was doing his research at the turn of the century, there was a lot more. But even then, there were a minority of very healthy traditional societies that were healthy through the generations. And he kind of recorded habits as well as their nutrition. He recorded a lot of other stuff. That what did they do in their, as what was part of their lifestyle? And one of the common themes was A, they actually passed down health information to their kids, so it was naturally taught as part of growing up. And B, one of the things they did was all couples think of a tribe or a community, they were prioritized for the best food. So, I mean, you got to think about this. They're traditional societies, so they're already eating natural, organic food. They're probably hunter-gatherers. They're farmers in most cases, actually, in this case. So they're eating all the good food. And still, the tribal elders are saying, hang on now, you need to go even one step higher again. And we're giving you the organ meats, and you're going to get the best food and the lobster and the shrimp, and we'll provision, to the wannabe couple, the wannabe parents, for at least 2 years before. And that was to protect the health of the tribe. And it worked for years, and it worked until modern commerce sort of invaded the locality with white flour and white sugar. In fact, that was the turning point.
Yeah.
So preparation.
Preparation. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Brendan. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's really been an important conversation, and I do think it will resonate with a lot of people who feel sick, stuck, frustrated, or unheard in their fertility journey.
Yeah.
This conversation really highlights that fertility isn't broken, it's adaptive. And when we listen to what the body is asking for, incredible things can happen.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah. So then again, just to reiterate about Brendan is the author of Getting Pregnant When the Body Says No, a book that invites us to stop forcing outcomes and instead start listening to what the body's asking for through nutrition, lifestyle, stress, regulation, and whole body health. So he works with men and women who want to take a more informed and empowered approach to fertility. And again, he's the creator of the Foundations for Fertility program. So it gets everybody helping to get ready for pregnancy without overwhelm. So if this conversation has spoken to you, I strongly encourage you to check out Brendan's work in his book. We'll put all the relevant links in the show notes as usual. And Brendan, thanks again for the work that you're doing and sharing your insights with us today.
No, thank you, Richard. It's been a really interesting conversation. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Take care. Thank you for joining me on the Integrative Continuum. I hope today's conversation gave you new insights and practical tools for your own health journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with someone who would benefit, and leave us a review. It helps us spread this message further. Until next time, I'm Dr. Richard Rocker. Stay curious, stay empowered, and keep moving forward on your path to integrative health.